This past summer, Allison and I took the boys on what I believe was one of the most remarkable trips we've ever been on. We flew into Denver and then drove from park to park, hitting places like Custer State Park, Mount Rushmore, the Crazy Horse Memorial, the Badlands, Yellowstone, and the Grand Tetons. On the way, we saw where the Oregon Trail and the Pony Express routes passed through Casper, Wyoming. We also had a meal or two at Buffalo Bill's Irma Hotel. And we went to a real rodeo in Cody, Wyoming. I'll be honest, that rodeo was more fun than I was expecting it to be. Just ask Matthew about it when you see him tomorrow. Ask him what happened to one of the bull riders. He'll have a story for you. But don't worry, no people or animals were hurt. Maybe an ego bruised, but no one physically damaged. There was, however, one stop, though, that I just can't get out of my head. And the longer it's been since we went, the more it's been festering and coming around. While in Cody, we felt it was tremendously important to take our kids to see one of the many World War II Japanese internment camps. This one was just 13 miles outside of town, and we felt that as Jews, particularly Jews living in America right now, there was no excuse for us not to go. The day started off with us going to the Buffalo Bill Museum, and there were all types of entertaining displays about Buffalo Bill. The museum itself was fun and lively, brimming with visitors. The kids were running from exhibit to exhibit. That afternoon, we took them to the internment camp. What a stark difference. We drove from a bustling little town to the outskirts. The little shops and the Wild West regalia stores started to melt away and were replaced by open fields and pastures. And then, after about 10 minutes on a straightaway, with nothing to the left and right for miles around, there was a small little sign for a museum indicating, "Turn here." We almost missed it. We drove for another mile and went over a hill, then spotted this solitary building. As we pulled in, we saw that their massive parking lot was empty, except for one car. We parked, and as we walked through the museum doors, a sweet, polite woman who seemed shocked to see us popped out of her seat to welcome us. The first building, the one we were in, was down below at the bottom of the hill. This was the museum. The camp was on top on the other side of the ridge, as if deliberately placed out of sight from the rest of the world so that our country's sins could remain hidden. The museum had artifacts and letters, as well as a video that welcomed you and explained how an internment camp could come to be in America, of how people would willingly get on a train and leave everything behind, and how soldiers would be willing to detain fellow citizens without due process. At one point during the video, a soldier was reminiscing on his time as a guard and said, "We swore an oath to this country, to our Constitution, and then we were told these people were the enemy, and that we had to protect our nation, and we needed to stand guard over them. And then we got to know them, and looking back, we realized that we were like sheep, blindly following orders without thinking about whether they were orders that should have been followed to begin with." The movie ended. Then a door in the back of the theater opened into the rest of the museum. It was filled with countless relics and documents about what happened. If the Buffalo Bill Museum was about frivolity and playfulness of life, this was about the human capacity to objectify others. There was one photo, one image that caught my eye. It was a photo of a Japanese-American man being fingerprinted. And next to this mild-mannered man was a quote that read, "We are going into exile as our duty to our country, because the president and the military commanders of this area have deemed it necessary. We have pledged our full support to President Roosevelt and to the nation. This is a sacred promise which we shall keep as good patriotic citizens." We then left the museum and went up to the campsite. The only things that remained of it were 2 dormitories and a crematorium, as well as the footprint of the main hall. They warned us not to go into the dormitories because there was dangerous exposed asbestos. The next day, we drove to Yellowstone National Park. In the park, you see people from every walk of life, every political background, just enjoying nature. It was wonderful to be in such a beautiful place with the beautiful landscapes, but to also be out of reach from the internet and from all the hostilities of the world. We went on hikes and exploration for days. The natural beauty was just breathtaking. I must admit, I also enjoyed all the people watching and meeting new individuals. While walking around Mammoth Hot Springs, we passed someone who was wearing a shirt that caught my eye. It simply read, "Lions, not sheep." Nothing more, nothing else to explain it. Instantly, I was taken back to the internment camp. Soldier and citizen both acting righteously and with pride, but acting like sheep. I shook off the thought and tried to get a photo of the shirt, but it was too late. I didn't see the shirt before, and I didn't see it again. I Googled the phrase later on, and it seems to be a slogan that a couple of extreme right-wing groups use to speak about their devotion to the former president and their loathing of the current one. I spent the rest of the day thinking about the metaphors of lions and sheep. On Yom Kippur, we ask God to forgive our sins. But our liturgy and our rabbinic tradition reminds us time and again that Yom Kippur only helps us atone for sins committed between us and God, not between one another. That we need to wrestle and struggle with our actions and ask forgiveness for what we've done wrong, like when the guard at the internment camp sought out his prisoners so he could beg for and receive their forgiveness. There's another level here when thinking about our actions. The key to it lies in our Vidui prayers, our confessional prayers. The Vidui prayers are all written in the plural, for the wrongs we have committed. We need to take an inventory of how we as a society are faring towards one another. And what I am seeing a lot of are a lot of people who are confusing self-righteousness for righteousness. In particular, especially on this anniversary of October 7th, I'm thinking about the social justice campus warriors who are chanting things like "from the river to the sea," but have no idea what river or what sea. Or think that blocking Jewish students from getting to class will somehow stop a conflict in the Middle East. Like this.
You guys have closed the entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. Excuse me. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Well, I can't take it. Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them.
I can't tell you how many of our graduates have reported seeing similar things like that over the past year. Or how they've said that they've talked about the videos that Hamas shared. You know, the videos of they themselves committing awful acts of violence and rape. And the people they talk to, the people they show it to, just call it Zionist propaganda. This is slightly different than the individuals who understand and know outright that the origins of phrases like from the river to the sea or a global intifada mean the eradication of the state of Israel and the death of all Jews. Now, do I believe that all of these campus protesters are anti-Semitic? No. No, I don't think it's anti-Semitic to stand up for innocent Palestinians or call for a ceasefire and beg for the reduction of civilian casualties. However, when you combine it with a delegitimization of the state of Israel, with a wrongful demonization, or when you bully Jewish students or harass them like this, or applaud and celebrate Hamas as righteous warriors, despite knowing full well that Hamas and their leader Sinwar call for the death of all Jews and will stop at nothing to achieve it. At one point, Sinwar even confessed that he didn't care how many Palestinians die if it meant the end to Israel. That's when we get into anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism truly is the new form of anti-Semitism, and we are seeing it play out with a rise in anti-Semitic incidents post-October 7th. According to the FBI, in 2023, there was a 63% increase in anti-Semitic hate crime to a record-breaking 1,832 recorded criminal incidents. The Anti-Defamation League's numbers are higher because they record both criminal and non-criminal incidents. They reported 8,873 incidents in 2023, representing a 140% increase from the previous year. These include incidents like protesters going after people for just wearing kippot, or the protests that entered the subway calling for Zionists to identify themselves, or when an employee of a bookstore in Brooklyn cancels a book talk and signing because the presenters believe that Israel has a right to exist. A video surfaced where she talked of how proud she was in banning Zionist Jews from the store in Brooklyn. These are not actions that are aimed at minimizing the death of innocent life. They are just anti-Semitic through and through. One can certainly critique what Israel is doing and not be anti-Semitic. Israelis do it every day. When I was in Israel in March, I spoke with a lot of people, with family members of hostages, like Alon's family, and with people who lost relatives. I didn't come across a lot of people who thought Netanyahu was doing a swell job in handling this 100% correctly, or that Smotrich or Ben Gvir are exactly what Israel needs. There are people who do believe that. I just didn't come across a lot of them. There is a difference, though, between a legitimate critique of Netanyahu and blatant anti-Semitism. When we were walking through the internment camp and we saw how easy it was to objectify another human being, I thought about the college encampments and the cases I just mentioned. I thought about the insurrection on January 6th, and I thought about Charlottesville and Jews will not replace us. I thought about all the animosity we feel towards one another, and I thought that if we aren't really careful, something like this internment camp could easily happen again. And who knows who's going to be on the other side. On one of the last days of our trip, we woke up to the news that the 6 hostages, who include Hirsch Goldberg Poland, were found dead. Our hearts ached, and we felt the need to be with others who are going through similar pain. We went to the center of Jackson, Wyoming, and we met up with a Wyoming for Israel gathering. This group had people from every background, faith, political ideology gathering in support of Israel. There wasn't a police presence. There weren't protests. There were just people trying to support one another. It was cathartic to be with that mix of people. It felt good to sing Oseh Shalom with everyone, although I think our East Coast accents messed them up a little bit. After the gathering, I went up to the Chabad rabbi who organized the event, and we chatted for a bit. We spoke about how good it was to dwell together and how the extremes of society are making it harder and harder to do that. Those groups represent maybe the 10 yards on either side of a football field. I know, I'm surprised I'm making a sports reference as well. Most of us represent all the turf in between those two ends, but it's hard to score. It's hard to get anything done if you have to go through them first. Lions and sheep. Perhaps there is a better animal to strive for. Perhaps the wise owl. Perhaps we should strive to be more like the guard at the camp who paused long enough to meet his captives and learn who they really were. But it's hard to do that with all the boundaries we put up around us. As I mentioned on Rosh Hashanah, my wife Allison is an assistant director at the URJ's Crane Lake Camp. The camp means the world to our family. It is, after all, where Allison and I got married and where we met. And I love what the camp does for our boys and how much they look forward to going every summer. Beyond all the activities, I think they love going because one of the many things the camp does really well is foster a culture of kindness. It is at the core of their identity. It was so refreshing to visit on the weekends and spend time in a community that lives and breathes the principle that one should always assume good intent. And when you speak with people, even if it's to tell them some difficult truths, it should always be done in a kind way. To me, that's a sacred community. But I'm a realist, and I know what some of you are thinking right now. Isn't there a place where you have to draw the line? And the answer is yes. Even though our tradition believes that multiple and at times contradictory things can be true in the same exact moment, it doesn't also mean that there are things that are just wrong. Inciting violence and pain, rhetoric and behavior that exponentially raises the amount of anti-Semitism and xenophobia around us, these ideologies must be decried, must be fought, and must not be tolerated. The difficulty we face is twofold. The first is having the courage to do so. The second is knowing where that line must be drawn. Earlier this week, I had a moment that seemed a little surreal to me. You see, I was invited to a small group meeting of Jewish leaders in New Jersey to meet with the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries. It was the morning of October 7th, and he wanted to meet with us, I guess, on his way down to DC to an event, to talk to us about anti-Semitism in America, and to hear from us on how we're doing a year after October 7th. It was really weird and to stand there and chat with Hakeem Jeffries. You know, 2 boys from Midwood High School. At one point, while we were discussing the rise of anti-Semitism, he said something that brought me back to the internment camp. He labeled himself as a Zionist, telling us that he visited Israel more than any other country in the world, and that during one of his many visits, he met with a German ambassador. I wasn't quite sure if it was the German ambassador to Israel or the Israeli ambassador to Germany, but you get the point. The ambassador brought up that Germany has something that America doesn't, that serves as a safeguard against anti-Semitism. That is, aside from their lack of a First Amendment. And that they have a culture of remembrance in a way that we don't. They have a culture of remembering shame. They make it a practice to remember the horrors they caused. They lean into it as a way of being able to move forward and prevent future catastrophes. That they won't tolerate people ignoring their past or pretending it didn't happen, kind of like us trying to ignore the fact that we had internment camps. There are boundaries to what is acceptable to say and what is not. It's a tricky thing to have room for others, but also have a boundary. Are the boundaries we draw, are the actions we take, are they born out of true righteousness, as taught by our faith and our tradition, or are they born out of a sense of self-righteousness that only serves our own wants and desires and lets us objectify others with greater ease? Yashava v'yeshvul. There is love, but there's also a limit. Let us work for a time where we live in a world that has the proper balance of both and not just boundaries all around us. Shana Yoter Tov. May this coming year be a better year than the year we have all lived through. And may we and our people be inscribed in the book of lives well lived. May we see an end to this war and to this fighting, and may we soon come to a time when we all live in peace. Amen.